Emma's daughter screamed at me during her engagement party in front of 80 guests. "Margaret, if you can't afford to contribute properly to this wedding, maybe you shouldn't come at all." The champagne glasses clinked awkwardly as conversations died down. What Emma didn't know was that the sprawling vineyard estate in Napa Valley, where she was getting engaged, worth $4.2 million, was mine. The Tesla Model X her fiancé drove to impress his colleagues was registered under my company. The Black American Express card she'd been using to book wedding venues across California belonged to an account I controlled. Everything, every single thing was mine. Strong and M&M, and I am Margaret Eleanor Chen. I'm 61 years old, and this is the story of how my carefully constructed silence nearly cost me my daughter's respect, and how shattering that silence saved both of us. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the vineyard's grand hall. I had been working since dawn, arranging the white roses Emma loved, ensuring the catering staff had everything they needed, adjusting the string quartet's positioning for optimal acoustics. 80 people were mingling on the terrace, sipping Domaine Chandon and sampling artisanal cheeses from local farms. Cousins, aunts, uncles, Emma's sorority sisters, her fiancé Brandon's business associates. The tables gleamed with Versace dinnerware and Waterford crystal that caught the California sun like tiny prisms. I moved between the kitchen and the terrace, checking details, refilling champagne flutes, making sure the smoked salmon appetizers were circulating properly. My cotton blouse was simple, my gray slacks practical. My hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back in a low chignon. My hands, marked by decades of work, carefully adjusted napkins and straightened silverware. "Margaret, come sit with us," my sister Diane called from a table near the fountain, her voice dripping with that particular brand of pity I'd grown to recognize. "You've done more than enough." "I'm fine," I replied, forcing warmth into my smile. "I just want everything to be perfect for Emma." From my position near the service entrance, I could see the entire terrace. Emma stood at the center, radiant in her cream Zimmermann dress, her engagement ring catching the light. She was talking to Brandon's parents about the wedding venue they'd chosen, a luxury resort in Big Sur that cost $18,000 just for the weekend rental. "We're thinking late September," Emma was saying, gesturing with her champagne flute. "Brandon's been working insane hours at the tech startup, pulling in 6 figures plus equity. Thank God we can actually afford the wedding we want." Brandon, in his tailored Hugo Boss suit and those Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, nodded confidently. The company's Series B funding came through last month. $20 million. My shares are looking good. We're talking about buying a place in Pacific Heights next year. My cousin Vivian, sitting nearby, smiled that knowing smile. "Real estate in San Francisco is absolutely brutal right now. You need at least $2 million just for something decent." "Exactly," Emma interjected, her voice carrying across the terrace. "That's why we're being smart about expenses. Every dollar counts when you're building wealth in the Bay Area." I felt something tighten in my chest, but kept arranging the dessert display. Miniature lemon tarts from a famous French pastry chef, each one costing $12. No one seemed to notice. The afternoon continued with toasts and laughter and stories about Emma's childhood. Her sorority sister Madison stood up, slightly tipsy, holding her champagne glass high. "To Emma," she declared, "who has always known exactly what she wanted and worked her ass off to get it. Stanford wasn't easy, but you crushed it. And now you're marrying a tech genius and living your best life." And then it happened. Everyone cheered. Brandon kissed Emma's temple. His mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. And then it happened. Emma's college roommate, Sophie, mentioned the wedding budget in passing, something about destination bachelorette parties and custom bridesmaid dresses. Emma laughed, that bright, confident laugh she'd inherited from her father. "We're keeping it reasonable," she said, though her definition of reasonable had apparently shifted. "Brandon and I are covering most of it ourselves. It's important to us to be financially independent." She paused, took a sip of champagne, and then her eyes found me near the dessert table. There was something in her expression I'd seen before, the same determination her father, David, had when making business decisions. But this time, that look brought nothing good. "Actually, Mom," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient conversation like a knife through silk, "since we're talking about wedding expenses and being transparent." The terrace began to quiet. 80 pairs of eyes started turning in our direction. "I've been thinking," Emma continued, setting down her glass with a deliberate clink, "that if you want to be involved in the wedding planning, you should probably contribute financially. That's how adult family members participate." Time crystallized into something sharp and fragile. "It's only fair, right?" She looked around at the guests, seeking validation. "Everyone should contribute according to their means. And if that's difficult with your situation, with just Dad's life insurance, and whatever you make from that little consulting thing you do, well..." So empired she trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Brandon's mother, Judith, cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Emma, darling, perhaps this isn't the right—" "It needs to be said," Emma interrupted, emboldened by champagne and the audience. "Mom has always been so secretive about money, never wanting to discuss finances, always acting like she can barely afford things. If she can't contribute meaningfully to this wedding, maybe it's better if she just comes as a guest and lets Brandon and me handle everything ourselves." I looked around the terrace. My sister Diane was studying her shoes. Cousin Vivian was suddenly fascinated by her phone. Not one person, not a single guest, raised their voice to question what my daughter had just said. No one asked, "How can you speak to your mother this way?" No one wondered aloud, "Do you understand what you're saying?" The silence was so complete, I could hear the fountain's water trickling, the distant sound of a wine tour group laughing on the hill. I felt 35 years of calculated sacrifice, of building an empire in the shadows so my daughter could have everything without the burden of expectation, evaporating in the warm Napa Valley air. Carefully, I placed the serving tongs back on the dessert table. I folded my apron and set it aside. I stood up straight, feeling my spine align with something that felt like dignity remembering itself. "Thank you all for coming," I said in a voice so steady it surprised even me. "This engagement party will probably be the last family event I spend planning in silence." Emma blinked, confusion crossing her face. "Mom, you don't have to be so dramatic. We're just having an honest conversation about—" "You're absolutely right, Emma," I interrupted her, looking directly into eyes that matched my own. "It's time for honesty. Complete honesty." I turned and walked toward the main house, through the tasting room with its imported French oak barrels, past the commercial kitchen where the catering staff worked, down the hallway lined with photographs of harvests past. Behind me, I heard uncomfortable murmurs, someone trying to restart the music, Brandon's father suggesting more champagne. I closed the door to what Emma thought was the estate manager's private office. The sound of the latch was soft, but in my head it resonated like the ending of a complete chapter. 35 years. How did I get here? Let me take you back to where this story really begins. I was 24 years old, standing in a tiny apartment in Oakland, holding my newborn daughter Emma while my husband David worked 16-hour days as a software engineer at a startup that would eventually become obsolete. The apartment was 600 square feet. We shared a bathroom with the neighbors. The heating worked intermittently. David and I had met at Berkeley. I was studying economics and computer science. He was in electrical engineering. We got married 3 months after graduation in a simple ceremony at the courthouse. Our honeymoon was a weekend camping trip to Yosemite because that was what we could afford. Emma was born 2 years earlier, and that was what we could afford. Michael was pulling in $45,000 a year at his startup. Every dollar we earned went into 2 places, Emma's future college fund and a separate account we called the Foundation. No luxuries. No fancy dinners. No designer clothes or expensive vacations. Just work, saving, and one unified dream: to build something that would last. I taught myself real estate investment by reading every book the library had, attending free seminars, networking at Chamber of Commerce meetings while Emma napped in her stroller. David would come home exhausted, and we'd eat simple meals: rice and beans, pasta with homemade sauce, while discussing market trends and property values. It took us 9 years. 9 years of counting pennies. 9 years of Emma growing up wearing clothes from thrift stores and playing with toys from garage sales. 9 years of telling her we couldn't afford Disneyland when her friends went on vacation. In 1995, we bought our first property, a small commercial space in Emeryville, for $95,000. We renovated it ourselves. David handled electrical. I learned basic plumbing from YouTube videos that were just starting to exist. Emma, at 7 years old, helped paint the walls on weekends. We leased it to a graphic design company for $3,000 a month. That money went into the foundation, and then into the next property and the next. David had a gift. He could look at a struggling neighborhood and see exactly what it would become in 10 years. I had a different gift. I could structure deals, find creative financing, and make every dollar multiply through strategic partnerships. By 2003, we owned 9 properties across the East Bay. A lawyer suggested we create a formal corporate structure. David thought about the golden hills we'd see driving through California, those endless rolling slopes that seemed to go on forever. Chen Holdings, he said, simple, strong, like we're holding on to the future. We navigated the 2008 financial crisis by buying when others panicked. Properties in Berkeley, commercial spaces in San Francisco, residential developments in San Jose. By 2012, Chen Holdings had a portfolio worth $42 million. And then, on a Thursday morning in March 2015, David put his hand to his chest during a conference call in our home office. "Margaret," he whispered. Those were his last words. The paramedics said it was a massive coronary, instantaneous. He didn't suffer, they told me, as if that provided comfort. I sat in the waiting room, staring at the fluorescent lights, and made a decision that would shape the next decade of my life. Emma was 22, just finishing Stanford with her degree in communications. She was bright, ambitious, determined. She was also about to enter a world that judged young women harshly, that questioned their achievements, that assumed wealth came from family money rather than personal merit. And I decided she would never carry that burden. She would never be the rich girl whose mother owned half the Bay Area. She would build her own identity, earn her own respect, develop her own character without the weight of my empire pressing down on her shoulders. Strong and FS. So I stayed silent. I created structures, layers, corporate entities. I worked with my longtime business partner, Thomas Reeves, who became the public face of Chen Holdings as CEO, while I operated from a small back office in Oakland. I lived modestly, kept my old Honda Accord, shopped at Target, and let Emma believe that we were comfortable but not wealthy, that David's life insurance had provided a cushion but nothing extravagant. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files I'd been avoiding looking at for too long. Articles of incorporation for Chen Holdings LLC. Stock distribution. Margaret Eleanor Chen, 87%. Executive Director Thomas Reeves. Operating shares. Property contracts. Napa Valley Estate, Silverado Trail, $4.2 million. Owner, Chen Holdings LLC. Vehicle registration. Tesla Model X, black. VIN 5YJ3E1EB8KF. Registered to Chen Holdings LLC. Authorized user, temporary, Brandon Mitchell. Credit card, American Express Black. Primary account holder, Margaret Eleanor Chen. Authorized additional user, Ava Chen. I slowly scrolled through the documents. Each one was a reminder of what I'd built, of what I'd allowed my daughter to believe belonged to someone else. 3 years ago, Emma had graduated Stanford, and landed a job at a marketing agency in San Francisco. Her starting salary was $58,000, good for the Bay Area, but not enough for the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to dreaming about. She came to visit me at what she thought was my small consulting office in Oakland. I worked from a modest space in the back of one of our buildings while Thomas handled client meetings and public appearances. "Mom," she said, sitting across from my desk, "I want to get my own place. I found an apartment in Mission District, but the rent is $3,200 a month. With my salary, it's possible, but it's tight." I looked at my daughter. She had David's eyes, that same determination. But there was also a youthful naivety that hadn't yet learned the real cost of independence. I opened the Chen Holdings property management system on my computer. "We have a condo available in Pacific Heights," I told her. 1,500 square feet, renovated last year. Market value for rent would be $4,800 a month. Emma's eyes widened. "Mom, that's way beyond my budget. I can arrange it for $2,400, I said. "It's a tenant assistance program the company offers. You'd qualify." "Seriously?" Her face lit up like sunrise. "But won't they need it for someone else?" "You deserve a safe, beautiful place to live," I said. The truth was that condo was mine, but she didn't need to know that. "Besides, I'd rather see you somewhere I know is secure." She signed the lease that week. On paper, it read, "Tenant, Emma Margaret Chen. Landlord, Chen Holdings Property Management, LLC." She never asked who owned Chen Holdings. She never looked beyond the corporate name to see my signature on every document. 2 years later, Brandon appeared. A tech entrepreneur with one successful app exit and another startup gaining traction. He was smart, ambitious, and confident. Emma posted photos of their relationship constantly. My brilliant boyfriend's new office space showed our Soma property. Weekend in Wine Country was my Napa estate that I'd told her was an Airbnb we'd gotten a good deal on. When they got engaged, I gave them something else. Authorization to use one of the company vehicles. "Just until you two save up for your own car," I told Emma. "Consider it an engagement gift." That temporary authorization was still active 18 months later. And the credit card. "For wedding expenses," I'd said, "just for the important things." Important things became weekly dinners at Gary Danko. Emergency purchases included $4,000 Louboutin shoes. I received the statements every month and paid them in silence. $800 here, $2,000 there, $6,000 on a spontaneous trip to Cabo. I never said anything. I just kept believing that love meant giving everything and expecting nothing. I was wrong. Silent love that expects nothing teaches nothing. It creates entitlement disguised as independence. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. I picked up my phone. It was 7:30 in the evening. Outside, I could hear the party continuing. Someone laughing, the quartet playing Vivaldi. I dialed a number I'd had on speed dial for 20 years. "Thomas, it's Margaret." "Margaret, how did the party go?" His voice carried concern. Thomas Reeves had been David's best friend and had become my closest confidant after my husband's death. He was the only one who knew the full truth about my role in Chen Holdings. "I need you to prepare all documentation related to Emma first thing tomorrow morning," I said, looking at the photos on the office wall. David and me at our first property closing. Emma's Stanford graduation. A Napa vineyard on the day we acquired it. The condo lease, the vehicle authorization, the credit card statements, everything. There was a pause on the other end. "Margaret, are you absolutely certain?" "Completely certain," I replied. "It's time for my daughter to learn the true meaning of independence." I pulled a small overnight bag from the closet. Dust rose when I opened it. Inside were still tags from a trip to Seattle, that David and I had planned before his death. We never made it. I started folding clothes. I didn't have much here at the estate. A few casual outfits, comfortable shoes, a sweater. Everything fit in half the bag. I stopped in front of the mirror. A 61-year-old woman looked back at me. Silver hair, lines around my eyes that mapped out decades of strategic decisions and silent sacrifices. I had spent 35 years building something extraordinary, and in the last 3 years, I had allowed my daughter to diminish that legacy while I orchestrated her happiness from the shadows. Why did I do it? Why did I allow her to believe that fiction? Because I wanted her to be happy. Because I wanted her to feel accomplished, capable, self-made. Because I thought if I gave her everything without her knowing, she would naturally develop gratitude. Because I wanted her to feel accomplished, capable, self-made. Because I thought if I gave her everything without her knowing, she would naturally develop gratitude. A zipper's sound felt conclusive, like a door closing on one chapter so another could begin. I took my purse, put in my wallet, my phone, the keys to my actual primary residence, the one Emma had never seen, and opened the office door. The sound of celebration drifted through the hallway. They had clearly moved past the uncomfortable moment. Someone was giving another toast. I could hear Emma's laugh, bright and unburdened. I walked through the main hall, my small bag rolling behind me on the hardwood floors. The wheels made a sound that seemed impossibly loud. The music stopped. Conversations halted. 80 heads turned. Diane was the first to speak, her voice filled with performative concern. "Margaret, don't be dramatic. No one's asking you to leave. Emma was just having an adult conversation about financial responsibility," I finished for her. "You're absolutely right, Diane. It's time for all of us to be responsible adults." Emma stood up from her table, her cheeks flushed from champagne and embarrassment. "Mom, where are you going? I didn't mean you should leave tonight. I just wanted to have an honest discussion about expectations." "So, I heard you perfectly, Emma," I said, standing in the doorway with California twilight painting the sky behind me. "You believe this estate belongs to someone else. You believe the car is Brandon's achievement. You believe everything you have came from your own hard work and his success." Emma strong. Brandon stood too, putting a protective arm around Emma's shoulders. "Mrs. Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Emma works extremely hard. She's earned everything." "Has she?" I interrupted him gently. "Tell me, Brandon, when you drive that Tesla to your investor meetings, do you know who holds the title?" His face registered confusion. "And Emma," I continued, looking at my daughter, "when you use the black Amex to book this venue, this party, did you ever wonder whose account that card draws from?" "You said it was a gift," Emma said defensively. "You said it was for wedding expenses." "I did say that," I agreed. "And I've said many things over the years. But here's what I should have said 3 years ago. Everything you think you've achieved on your own was built on a foundation I constructed and then hid from you." The terrace was completely silent now. "I could explain everything right here," I said, feeling the weight of 3 decades pressing against my chest. "I could pull out property deeds and corporate documents and show everyone exactly who owns what. But I won't, because the best lessons don't come from explanations. They come from experience." Emma took a step toward me, her hand outstretched. "Mom, at least tell me where you're going. Let me call you a car." "No need," I replied. "I already arranged my own transportation." "But you have to tell me you're safe. You have to let me know." I looked into her eyes. My daughter. The child I'd held through nightmares. The teenager I'd coached through heartbreak. The woman who had just chosen pride over compassion. "When I decide the time is right to communicate," I said softly, "I will. Until then, consider this my engagement gift to you both, the opportunity to build your life with complete independence." "Mom, please don't." "Happy engagement, Emma. Brandon, take care of my daughter." I walked out of my own vineyard estate, down the stone pathway lined with lavender, past the fountain where Emma had played as a child during our first visit to this property when we were deciding whether to buy it. A black town car was waiting, driven by Marcus, one of our longtime company drivers. "Evening, Miss Chen," he said, taking my bag. "Where to?" "The Presidio house, please." I settled into the back seat. San Francisco's lights were beginning to twinkle in the distance. The Golden Gate Bridge stretched across the bay like a promise. This city, my city. David and I had conquered it dollar by dollar, property by property, decision by decision. And somewhere along the way, I had made myself invisible in my own story. The car merged onto Highway 29, heading south toward the city. I watched the vineyards roll past, each one representing someone's dream, someone's generations of work. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Emma. 1 text message. "Mom, please just tell me you're okay. I'm sorry if I upset you. It was just a conversation about being practical. Call me." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the Chen Holdings management system. I clicked on the folder labeled Emma Chen Associated Assets. A list appeared on the screen, glowing blue in the dim interior of the car. Property lease, Pacific Heights condo, expires March 31st. Vehicle authorization, Tesla Model X, temporary use permission. Credit card, American Express Black, 5-figure credit limit, linked to primary account. 3 clicks. That was all I needed to change my daughter's understanding of reality. Was I being cruel? Vindictive? No. I was being a mother who finally understood that the greatest act of love isn't providing everything. It's teaching the value of what you provide. I closed the laptop. Tomorrow morning, I would meet with Thomas. Tomorrow, the process would begin. Tonight, I would sleep in my actual home for the first time in weeks. The Presidio house was a modernist structure, tucked into the trees overlooking the bay. 3,000 square feet of glass and steel and carefully curated simplicity. This was where I actually lived, where I did my real work, where David's presence still lingered in every corner we'd designed together. Marcus pulled up to the gate. I entered the code. The house lights were on. Time to create the illusion of occupation. "Thank you, Marcus," I said as he brought my bag to the door. "Ms. Chen," he hesitated. "I've known Emma since she was little. What you're doing, it's hard, but it's right. Mr. David would be proud." I felt tears threatening for the first time that day. "Thank you, Marcus." Marcus. That means more than you know. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it. My real home, my real life. The life I'd been hiding for 3 years. I sat on the couch overlooking the bay and cried. Not from sadness, but from the release of carrying a lie that had grown too heavy. That night, I slept better than I had in 3 years. The Chen Holdings office occupied the 20th floor of a building in the financial district, right between the Transamerica Pyramid and the Ferry Building. I arrived at 8 o'clock on the morning of March 27th. The receptionist, a young man named Christopher, almost dropped his coffee when he saw me. "Miss Chen, we weren't expecting. Good morning, Christopher. Is Thomas in?" "Yes, he arrived an hour ago. He's in his office." I walked down the corridor. The walls displayed photographs of our most significant developments. In one, taken 7 years ago at the groundbreaking of a mixed-use complex in Oakland, David appeared in his construction helmet, smiling at something off-camera. Next to him, deliberately out of focus in the background, was me, reviewing blueprints. No one knew who that woman was. Just another consultant, another employee. I knocked on Thomas's door. "Come in." Thomas Reeves was 52, with silver hair and the kind of steady presence that made investors trust him immediately. When he saw me, he stood instantly. "Margaret, please, sit." I didn't sit right away. I went to the window. From here, you could see the entire bay, the morning ferries crossing to Sausalito, joggers along the Embarcadero, the city waking up to another day of striving. Thomas opened a leather folder on his desk. everything's here. But before we continue, I need to ask, are you absolutely certain? Once we start this process, Thomas, I turned to face him. David and I built Chen Holdings from nothing. We lived in a cramped apartment, ate ramen for years, sacrificed everything so we could create something meaningful. We never wanted to be the ostentatious wealthy family. But at some point, my humility became deception. Deception that allowed my daughter to speak to me as if I were a financial burden. I know, he said quietly. When you called last night and told me what happened, I wanted to drive up there myself and tell her the truth. That's exactly why I stopped you, I replied. The truth doesn't mean anything when it's delivered by someone else. She needs to discover it through consequences. I finally sat down. Thomas slid the folder toward me. The first document was the Pacific Heights condo lease agreement, signed 3 years ago with annual automatic renewals. Clause 7.3, Thomas pointed out. The landlord may terminate the agreement with 30 days' notice if the tenant fails to meet lease obligations or if the property is needed for other purposes. The second document was the vehicle authorization. Simple, direct. Chen Holdings LLC authorizes the temporary use of Tesla Model X, VIN 5YJ3E1EB8KF, to Brandon Mitchell for business representation purposes. This authorization may be revoked at any time with 48 hours notice. The third was the credit card statement for the past 6 months. My hands trembled looking at the numbers. Saison Restaurant, 3 Michelin stars. $1,247. Neiman Marcus, designer handbag, $4,800. Four Seasons Maui, honeymoon preview trip, $8,600. Cartier Boutique, jewelry, $3,400. The list continued for pages. In 6 months, Emma and Brandon had spent $73,400 on my credit card. Meanwhile, I was still wearing the same Ann Taylor blazer I'd bought 5 years ago. Did you also contact Patricia? I asked, referring to our attorney. She's waiting in the conference room. Patricia Dominguez was 55, brilliant, and had handled every significant legal matter for Chen Holdings since 2010. When I entered the conference room, she already had her laptop open and several California legal codes marked with digital bookmarks. Margaret, she said, standing to shake my hand, I'm sorry about what happened at the party. I don't need sympathy, I said, sitting down. I need legal solutions. Patricia nodded, appreciating my directness. Understood. We have 3 assets your daughter currently benefits from: the residence, the vehicle, and the credit card. Let's review options for each. She turned her laptop screen toward me. First, the Pacific Heights condo. The lease expires at the end of this month. Legally, you have the right not to renew. You simply need to send formal notice, which must be delivered no later than today to comply with California Civil Code. And if she refuses to vacate, then we initiate eviction proceedings. But Margaret, I don't think it will come to that. When she receives notice from Chen Holdings Property Management, not from her mother, the reality will shift. What if she tries to research the company, find out who owns it? Patricia smiled slightly. Chen Holdings is a multi-layered LLC structure. The principal shareholders are not publicly listed. She would need to subpoena corporate records from the Secretary of State, which requires legal grounds. By the time she navigates that process, if she even tries, 30 days will have passed. Vehicle authorization, Patricia continued. This is straightforward. It's company property. Brandon only has permission to use it. We can revoke that permission immediately and request the vehicle's return. How is that executed? We send a formal letter requesting return within 48 hours. If he doesn't comply, we send the company representative with a tow truck and the spare keys. Do it, I said without hesitation. Credit card, Patricia concluded. This is the simplest of all. It's an authorized user card on your personal account. You can cancel it with one phone call. Immediate effect. I looked at the 3 documents in front of me. My daughter would lose her apartment, her transportation, and her unlimited spending access within days. Is this too harsh? Thomas asked softly. We could do this gradually. First the card, then the car? No, I interrupted. Gradual would be cruel. It would be like removing one support beam at a time and watching her struggle to maintain balance. Better to remove them all at once and let her find her own foundation. Patricia looked at me with something resembling respect. You're stronger than most people realize. I'm not strong, I said. I'm a mother who enabled her daughter's misconceptions for 3 years and finally decided to correct them. We spent the next 3 hours drafting documents. Letter 1. Notice of lease non-renewal. Dear Miss Emma Chen, Chen Holdings Property Management LLC, in its capacity as landlord of the property located at 2847 Pacific Avenue, Unit 6B, San Francisco, hereby provides notice that the lease agreement expiring March 31st will not be renewed. In accordance with California Civil Code Section 1946, you are required to vacate the premises by the stated date in the same condition as when you took possession. Sincerely, Patricia Dominguez, Legal Counsel, Chen Holdings Property Management. SO and SO. We have been kindly requesting your vehicle return within 48 hours to our facility at 55 Folsom Street, San Francisco. We request return of the vehicle within 48 hours to our facility at 56 Folsom Street, San Francisco. Failure to comply will result in us proceeding with asset recovery through legal means. Sincerely, Thomas Reeves, Chief Executive Officer, Chen Holdings NLC. Letter 3. Credit card cancellation. This requires only a phone call. Patricia dialed on speakerphone. What's American Express Platinum Services? This is Jennifer. Good morning. Patricia said, I'm calling on behalf of Margaret Eleanor Chen, primary account holder for account ending in 9847. We need to cancel an authorized user card. Of course. May I have the authorized user's name? Emma Margaret Chen. And then, one moment please, typing sounds. Yes, I have the account here. Would you like immediate cancellation or scheduled? Patricia looked at me. I nodded. So, immediate. Very well, the card will be deactivated within 2 hours. Is there anything else? Yes, I said, leaning toward the phone. I'd like a complete transaction history for that card for the past 12 months, sent to my email. Absolutely, Miss Chen. You'll receive that within 24 hours. We disconnected. Patricia closed her laptop. The documents will be sent via certified mail and email within the hour. The card will be inactive before noon. The car, when do you want us to recover it? Tomorrow, I said. Give Brandon time to receive and read the letter first. Let him understand this isn't a mistake or a clerical error. Thomas leaned back in his chair. And you? Where will you be when this unfolds? At home. My actual home. I'm not hiding, but I'm not making anything easy either. If Emma wants to find me, she knows where this office is. But I won't be reaching out. What if she goes to the media? Patricia asked. Wealthy mother evicts daughter. That could make headlines. Let her, I said. I have 35 years of documentation showing exactly how David and I built this company. And I have 6 months of statements showing how Emma and Brandon treated it as their personal ATM. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. I stood up. My knees protested slightly. 61 years. Sometimes I felt every one of them in my bones. Thank you both. I know this is uncomfortable. Margaret, Thomas said, also standing. David would be incredibly proud of you. He always said, true love requires tough choices. I wish I'd remembered that sooner, I whispered. I left the office at 11:30. The morning fog had burned off, leaving San Francisco gleaming under March sunshine. Tourists were taking photos at the ferry building. A young couple was arguing about which cafe to choose for brunch. Normal life continued while mine transformed. I stopped in front of a Cartier window display. There, on the center mannequin, was a bracelet I recognized from the statements. $3,400. Emma had bought it in February and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "When your fiancé spoils you just because." My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Mom, good morning. Where are you? I stopped by your apartment in Oakland, but the building manager said you haven't lived there in years. Are you okay? Can you please call me?" I put the phone away without responding. I walked to a small cafe in North Beach, one of those places without Instagram presence, just honest espresso and real conversation. I ordered a cortado and a croissant. Total, $4.75. Emma probably spent that much on a single fingernail at her salon. My phone rang. "Thomas, the emails have been sent," he said. "Emma should receive the eviction notice any minute now." "Thank you." "Margaret, are you really okay?" "Yes," I replied, watching fog roll in from the bay. For the first time in 3 years, I'm okay. That night, I sat in my Presidio house, looking out at the Golden Gate Bridge, lit up against the dark sky, and waited for the storm I knew was coming. Day 1, March 27th, 10:15 in the morning. Emma opened her laptop at the kitchen island of her Pacific Heights condo. Brandon was still asleep after a late night with his startup team. The previous evening had been tense, with Emma unable to reach her mother and increasingly worried about the strange way Margaret had left the engagement party. She clicked through her inbox. Promotional emails, newsletters she never read, a message from her wedding planner about cake tastings, and then she saw it, a subject line that made her blood run cold. Important, lease termination notice, 2847 Pacific Avenue, Unit 6B. Sender, Chen Holdings Property Management Legal Department. Her heart started racing. She opened the email with shaking hands. She read it once, then again, then a third time, because her brain couldn't process the words, "will not be renewed. Vacate the premises. March 31st. California Civil Code. Is it yours?" she whispered aloudly. "What the hell?" she whispered. She immediately found the phone number at the bottom of the email and dialed, her hands trembling. 4 rings, then a professional female voice. "Chen Holdings Property Management, Legal Department. This is Sarah speaking." "Yes, hello, this is Emma Chen." Her voice came out high and tight. "I just received an email about my lease being terminated. This has to be a mistake. I've always paid rent on time. I've never had violations." "One moment, Ms. Chen." Keyboard typing. Each second felt eternal. "I have your file here. There's no mistake. The property owner has decided not to renew the lease agreement. It's their legal right, according to the terms you agreed to when you signed." "But why? What did I do wrong?" "Oh my gosh. I don't have that information, ma'am. I only execute the owner's decisions as directed by our legal team." "Who is the owner?" Emma demanded, feeling panic crawling up her throat. "I need to speak with them. This doesn't make any sense. That's not information. If you wish to appeal the decision, you may submit a formal written request to our legal department at the address provided in the notice." "I know that address," Emma said, something clicking in her mind. "That's near the financial district. I can come there. Today, right now." "The office handles these matters in writing only, Miss Chen. Is there anything else I can help you with? Can I at least reapply when the unit becomes available again?" "Of course." Scrolling continue. "When the property is listed again, you're welcome to submit an application like any other prospective tenant. The current market rate for that unit is $5,800 per month." Emma almost dropped her phone. $5,800? But I pay... "You pay $2,400, Miss Chen, a preferential rate that will no longer apply." The line went dead. Emma sat staring at her phone. $5,800. Her salary was $68,000 a year after taxes, about $5,200 monthly. The math was brutal and obvious. "Emma?" Brandon appeared in the bedroom doorway, wearing boxers and a Stanford t-shirt. "Why are you yelling?" "We're being evicted," she said in a hollow voice. "We have to be out of this apartment in 4 days. Brandon blinked as if she'd spoken a foreign language. What? No, this is your place. You've had it for 3 years. It's rented, Emma said numbly. It always has been. But you pay on time. You have tenant rights. They can't just... Yes, they can, Emma's voice cracked. And they did. Brandon walked over and read the email over her shoulder. His face changed from confusion to disbelief to anger. This is because of the engagement party, isn't it? He ran his hands through his hair. Your mother somehow orchestrated this. She must know someone at this company. I don't know, Emma whispered, but even as she said it, something was gnawing at her. Her mother's strange exit, her cryptic words about foundations and truth. She grabbed her jacket and her purse. Where are you going? To that address, Chen Holdings. I'm going to talk to someone face to face. This cannot be happening. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. 12:45 in the afternoon, Chen Holdings office. Emma parked the Tesla in a garage nearby. $4 per 15 minutes, a cost she usually never noticed. She walked quickly to the building on Folsom Street, her mind racing. The building was elegant, modern, all glass and steel. A discreet plaque near the entrance read, Chen Holdings LLC, 20th floor. Chen. Her last name. A coincidence? It had to be. She took the elevator up, her reflection staring back at her in the polished steel doors. She looked exactly like what she was, a privileged woman who was just beginning to realize how much of her privilege had been an illusion. The 20th floor opened into a sophisticated reception area. Minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the bay, and photographs lining the walls. Emma walked toward the reception desk, but something made her stop. One of the photographs, a large image of a commercial complex groundbreaking. In the foreground, a distinguished man in a suit was shaking hands with city officials. But in the background, slightly out of focus, was a woman reviewing blueprints. Emma stepped closer. Her heart started pounding. The woman in the photograph was her mother. Younger, maybe 10 years ago, but unmistakably Margaret Chen. May I help you? The receptionist. A young man with perfect posture smiled professionally. Emma couldn't form words. That photograph, who is that woman? The receptionist glanced at the image. I'm not sure. That was taken before I started working here. Is there something I can help you with? I'm a tenant, and I received an eviction notice that... You'll need to contact our legal department, he began. No, Emma said firmly. I need to speak with someone in person. The CEO, the president, whoever is in charge. Miss Chen is in a meeting. Emma's head snapped up. Miss Chen? The receptionist realized his mistake. I meant Mr. Reeves. Mr. Thomas Reeves, our CEO. He's in a meeting, but if you'd like to schedule... I'll wait, Emma said, sitting down in one of the leather chairs without asking permission. The receptionist looked uncomfortable, but made a phone call, speaking in low tones. Emma's mind was spinning. Miss Chen. Her mother in the photograph, the vineyard estate, the preferential rent. The credit card her mother had given her. No, it was impossible. Her mother worked in consulting. She lived simply. She drove a Honda. She shopped at Target. But the pieces were starting to form a picture Emma had been deliberately not looking at for 3 years. 20 minutes later, a door opened and Thomas Reeves emerged. He was distinguished, professionally dressed, with the kind of presence that commanded respect. Miss Chen, he said, extending his hand. I'm Thomas Reeves, CEO of Chen Holdings. I understand you have concerns about your lease termination. Emma stood, shaking his hand automatically. Yes, Mr. Reeves, that photograph on the wall. The woman in the background, who is she? Thomas followed her gaze. Something flickered across his face. That's from a groundbreaking in Oakland about 8 years ago. But who is she? I'm afraid I can't discuss our personnel or shareholders. But regarding your lease, let's talk in my office. In Thomas's office, with its panoramic views of San Francisco Bay, Emma felt small and lost. Mr. Reeves, I don't understand why my lease isn't being renewed. I've been a perfect tenant. I pay on time. Miss Chen. Thomas interrupted gently. The property owner has made a business decision. These things happen. There's nothing personal about it. Nothing personal? Emma's voice rose. I have 4 days to find a new place in one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. That feels pretty personal. I understand your frustration, Thomas said, his tone professional, but not unkind. But the lease agreement was always a yearly contract with renewal at the owner's discretion. You agreed to those terms. Who is the owner? Emma demanded. I have a right to know. Actually, you don't. Chen Holdings is a private company. Our ownership structure is confidential. Emma stood up, feeling dizzy. This is connected to my mother somehow. I don't know how, but... Thomas's expression didn't change, but Emma saw something in his eyes. Recognition. Confirmation. Mr. Reeves, she said slowly, do you know Margaret Chen? I'm afraid this conversation is over, Miss Chen. You have until March 31st to vacate the property. If you need resources for finding new accommodation, I can have my assistant provide you with some listings. Emma walked out of the office in a daze. As she left, she noticed another photograph she'd missed earlier, a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the Napa Valley Vineyard. In the background, barely visible, was her mother again, holding a folder and talking to someone who looked like Thomas Reeves. The vineyard. The condo, Chen Holdings, Chen. Emma walked to the Tesla, fumbling with the key fob. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely open the door. She sat in the driver's seat and pulled out her phone, searching Chen Holdings ownership. The results showed basic corporate information. Founded 1995. Portfolio of 47 properties, estimated worth $78 million. She clicked on images. Photographs of buildings, ceremonies, press releases, and then she saw it. A photo from a Business Journal article in 2019. Chen Holdings expands social housing initiative. In the photo was Thomas Reeves cutting a ribbon, and behind him, crystal clear, was her mother, Margaret Chen, dressed in a business suit, clearly participating in the event. The caption read, Thomas Reeves, CEO of Chen Holdings, at the launch of the company's affordable housing program, a project championed by the Chen family. The Chen family. Emma's vision blurred. She searched LinkedIn, typing Margaret Chen, Chen Holdings, San Francisco. No public profile appeared, but when she searched for Chen Holdings employees, a list generated. And there, without a photo or details, was a listing. Margaret E. Chen, principal shareholder. Principal shareholder. Oh my God, Emma whispered. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. She immediately called Brandon. Emma, did you find out anything? Brandon, her voice was shaking so hard she could barely speak. I think my mother owns Chen Holdings. What? That's impossible. Your mother doesn't... The condo is hers. The vineyard estate is hers. And I think... Emma felt sick. I think the Tesla you're driving might be registered to her company. That can't be right, Brandon said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I would have known. You would have known. Would we? Emma asked. Have we ever actually checked? Have I ever asked where the preferential rent came from? Have you ever looked at the Tesla's registration? Silence on the other end of the line. Check it, Emma said. Check the registration right now. She heard Brandon moving, opening the glove compartment, the rustle of papers. Then silence. Brandon, the vehicle is registered to Chen Holdings LLC, he said in a hollow voice. It says authorized temporary user, Brandon Mitchell. Emma felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her. Emma, we've been living in your mother's property, driving her car, while while I told everyone at the engagement party that I could afford everything on my own. While I told her to pay rent, Emma finished, nausea rising in her throat. In her own house. She hung up and immediately called her Aunt Diane. "Emma, honey, are you okay? Your mother still hasn't called me back and—" "Did you know?" Emma demanded. "Did you know about Mom and Chen Holdings?" A pause. A very long pause. "Diane, answer me." "Emma," her aunt's voice was careful. "Your mother has always been very private about her business affairs. After your father died, You knew," Emma said flatly. "You all knew. At the party, when I said those things, you all sat there knowing the truth and said nothing." "We thought you knew," Diane protested weakly. "We thought you and your mother had an understanding." "An understanding?" Emma laughed, a bitter sound. "What understanding? That I could humiliate her publicly while living off her wealth?" She ended the call and sat in the Tesla, her mother's Tesla, in a parking garage that cost more per hour than some people made in a day, and finally understood the magnitude of what she'd done. 2 hours later, Emma was standing outside a modest building in Oakland. The building manager had finally given her information after Emma broke down crying in the lobby. "Miss Chen hasn't lived here in years," the manager said. "She owned the unit but leased it to a young family in 2020. Nice people, 2 kids. If you're looking for your mother, I don't know where she actually lives." Emma sat on the steps of the building where she'd thought her mother lived, where she'd occasionally dropped by, always calling first, always brief visits. Had she ever actually gone inside? No. They always met in the lobby or went out for coffee. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Miss Chen, this is Alex from Chen Holdings Asset Management. We're calling about the Tesla Model X currently in your possession. We have a letter being delivered to your fiancé requesting return of the vehicle within 48 hours. Emma closed her eyes. "You're taking the car too." "The vehicle is company property, Miss Chen. The temporary authorization has been revoked. We'll need it returned to 156 Folsom Street by 6 p.m. on March 29th. "And what if we don't return it?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then we'll recover it with a tow truck and the spare keys in our possession. But I'm sure it won't come to that. Good day, Ms. Chen." The line went dead. Emma sat there on the steps as Oakland traffic passed by, as people lived their normal lives, as her entire understanding of reality crumbled into dust. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "I just got the letter about the car. Emma, what is happening?" She typed back. "We've been living a lie. That's what's happening." That evening, back at the condo that was no longer hers, Emma sat on the floor. Surrounded by boxes, she didn't have the energy to pack. Brandon was frantically searching for apartments on his laptop. "Everything in our price range is either in the East Bay or it's a studio," he said, his voice tight with stress. "With my salary and yours combined, we can afford maybe $3,000 a month. That gets us a 1-bedroom in Daly City or a studio in Soma." Emma wasn't listening. She was scrolling through her Instagram, looking at posts from the past 3 years. Photos of the condo with captions like, "Home Sweet Home," and "Living my best Pacific Heights life." The Tesla with "My love surprised me" and heart emojis. The Napa Vineyard with perfect engagement venue. Every single post was a lie. Every accomplishment she'd claimed was built on her mother's invisible foundation. She opened her wallet and pulled out the black American Express card. She tried to order dinner, something simple from their favorite Thai place. Declined. She tried again. Declined. She called the restaurant directly. "Hi, this is Emma Chen. I'd like to place an order for delivery." "Of course, Miss Chen. How will you be paying?" "I'll use the card on file." A pause. "I'm sorry, that card was declined. Do you have another method of payment?" Emma hung up without responding. She pulled out her personal credit card, the one with a $3,000 limit that she barely used. She ordered the food with that instead, watching the available credit drop by $47. Brandon looked up from his laptop. "We need to talk about the wedding." "What about it?" "Emma, the Big Sur venue requires a $50,000 deposit by next week. My startup hasn't distributed equity shares yet. My savings account has $12,000. Your savings has $8,000, Emma finished quietly. "I never really saved. I always had the card." "So, combined, we have $20,000, Brandon said. "That's not even half the deposit." Emma felt something inside her break, not dramatically, but quietly, like ice cracking under pressure. "We need to cancel the venue," she said. "What?" "We can't afford it, Brandon. We never could. We've been living in a fantasy funded by my mother while I treated her like she was a burden." Brandon closed his laptop. "What do we do now?" "I don't know," Emma said honestly. "But first I need to find my mother. I need to understand what I've done." Day 2, March 28th, 7:30 in the morning. Emma woke up on the couch, her neck stiff from sleeping at an odd angle. Brandon was already awake, making coffee in the kitchen of the apartment they had 4 more days to live in. "I'm gonna drive to the Chen Holdings office," Emma said. "If my mother is the principal shareholder, she has to show up there eventually." "Emma, I don't think that's—" "I don't care what you think," she snapped, then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry. I need to see her. I need to apologize." She showered, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, nothing designer, nothing expensive, and drove the Tesla to the financial district. She parked in the same garage as yesterday, watching the meter calculate charges that suddenly felt significant. She sat in the building lobby from 8 in the morning until noon. Employees came and went. No one paid attention to her. She watched every person, looking for her mother's silver hair, her careful walk, her quiet presence. At 12:15, she saw Thomas Reeves leaving for lunch. She intercepted him in the lobby. "Mr. Reeves, please. I just need to know if my mother is the owner of Chen Holdings." Thomas looked at her with something like compassion. "Ms. Chen, if your mother wants you to know something, she'll tell you herself. I can't reach her. She won't answer my calls. I don't even know where she really lives." "Then perhaps," Thomas said gently, "that's your answer. When she's ready, she'll contact you." He walked past her, leaving Emma standing in the lobby, feeling more lost than she'd ever felt in her life. Her phone rang. Her grandmother. "Grandma Carol? Emma Jane Chen, you get yourself to this hospital right now." Her grandmother's voice was sharp, angry in a way Emma had rarely heard. "What? Are you okay?" "What happened?" "I'm fine, but you and I need to have a conversation, and we're going to have it face to face. I'm at California Pacific Medical Center, room 412. You have 1 hour." The line went dead. The line went dead. California Pacific Medical Center, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Emma found her grandmother sitting up in bed, looking healthier than Emma had expected. Carol Chen was 78 years old, sharp as ever, with her daughter's same steel in her eyes. "Sit down," Carol commanded. Emma sat in the chair beside the bed. Emma sat. "Grandma, what's going on? Why are you in the hospital?" "Routine tests, nothing serious. But that's not why I called you here." Carol fixed her with a look that made Emma feel 12 years old again. "I heard about the engagement party, about what you said to your mother." Emma felt her face flush with shame. "Grandma, I didn't know." "Didn't know what? That your mother built an empire? That she owns half the commercial real estate in the Bay Area? That she could buy and sell your fiancé's entire startup without blinking?" "I honestly didn't know," Emma whispered. "She never told me." "She didn't tell you because she was protecting you," Carol said, her voice softening slightly. "Emma, do you have any idea what your parents sacrificed for you? I know Dad worked hard." "Hard?" Carol laughed bitterly. "Your father worked himself to death, literally. And your mother? She's been working 16-hour days since you were born. I watched them eat rice and beans for dinner, so they could save every penny. I watched them live in that tiny apartment, while you slept in their bed because there was no room for a crib. I watched your mother teach herself real estate investment by reading library books while you napped. Emma felt tears starting to form. Your first apartment, Carol continued, the Pacific Heights condo, your mother bought that building in 2005. She's owned it for 18 years. When you rented it, she wasn't doing you a favor. She was giving you her property at a fraction of its value. Why didn't she tell me? Because she wanted you to be strong on your own, Carol said. She didn't want you to grow up like those entitled rich kids who think the world owes them everything. She wanted you to develop character, ambition, self-respect. So she lied to me? Carol took her hand with surprising strength. You start by understanding something crucial. Your mother doesn't want your money. She doesn't need your apologies and words. She needs you to understand what she tried to teach you from the beginning. What's that? That the value of things isn't in their price tag. It's in the sacrifice required to build them. That real success isn't what you own. It's who you become in the process of earning it. How do I show her I understand? Carol squeezed her hand. You start over, Emma, from the beginning. Without her money, without her properties, without her safety net. You build something real, with your own hands, your own effort, your own character. That's the only way you can ever look her in the eyes again. Emma sat with her grandmother for another hour, listening to stories about her parents she'd never heard before. About the metal box under the bed where they saved dollars. About the second-hand clothes from thrift stores. About the 12 years it took to buy their first property. When she left the hospital, Emma understood something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just losing her apartment and her car. She was losing the illusion she'd been living in for 3 years. And maybe that was exactly what she needed. Day 3, March 29th, the return of the Tesla. Brandon drove the Tesla to the Chen Holdings facility on Folsom Street at 5:45 in the evening, 15 minutes before the deadline. Emma sat in the passenger seat, both of them silent. The facility was a modern garage and storage complex. A man in a Chen Holdings uniform was waiting with a clipboard. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Roberto from Asset Management. Brandon nodded, unable to speak. Keys, please. Brandon handed them over like he was giving away a piece of his identity. In a way, he was. The vehicle will be inspected for any damage. If everything is in order, you'll receive a release confirmation by email within 24 hours. And if there's damage? Emma asked. Then you'll be billed for repairs. Roberto's tone wasn't unkind, just professional. But from what I can see, you've taken good care of it. They watched as Roberto drove the Tesla into the garage, its electric hum fading until it disappeared completely. I took an Uber to work for 3 years before your mom gave me access to that car, Brandon said quietly. I forgot what that felt like. Being dependent on public transportation, budgeting for ride shares, timing my schedule around bus routes. I think that's the point, Emma said. We both forgot what things cost. What they're really worth. $27. Brandon winced when he paid it. 99-cent packages from Safeway. That night, they ate ramen noodles for dinner. Not artisanal ramen from the trendy place in Japantown, but 99-cent packages from Safeway that Emma cooked on the stove. Incidentally, this is terrible, Brandon said, but he ate it anyway. On to. Emma looked at the nearly empty apartment, at the boxes packed with their belongings, at the man she was supposed to marry, who suddenly looked younger and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. I called the Big Sur venue, she said. I canceled the reservation. What did they say? They're keeping the $5,000 deposit we already paid, but we won't owe the other $45,000. Brandon exhaled with relief. Okay, that's actually okay. I also called the wedding planner, the caterer, the florist. I canceled everything. Everything? Everything we can't actually afford, which is basically everything. Emma set down her bowl. Brandon, I need to ask you something. and I need you to be honest. Okay, do you still want to marry me? The real me. Not the me who had access to money and luxury. Not the me who could give you the lifestyle you thought we had. Just me with my $68,000 salary and my $8,000 in savings. Brandon was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I don't know, he admitted. And I think that's something I need to figure out, because I realize now that I fell in love with a version of you that maybe never really existed, or maybe a version of our life together that was always an illusion. Emma felt something break and heal simultaneously. That's fair. What about you? Brandon asked. Do you still want to marry me? Now that you know I can't actually afford the life I was pretending to provide? I don't know either, Emma said honestly. And I think that's okay. I think we both need time to figure out who we actually are without all the pretense. They sat in silence, eating their terrible ramen, and for the first time in 3 years, they were being completely honest with each other. Day 4, March 30th, the last day in the condo. Emma spent the entire day packing. Her sorority sisters had volunteered to help, but when they showed up and saw the reality of the situation, their enthusiasm waned. Wait, you're moving to where? Madison asked, looking at the address Emma had found. The Sunset District, a 1-bedroom, 800 square feet, $1,800 a month. So far from everything. It's what we can afford, Emma said simply. Madison exchanged looks with Sophie. I mean, if you need money for the deposit or something. We don't need charity, Emma interrupted, more sharply than she intended. We need to figure out how to live within our actual means. Her friends left early, claiming they had other commitments. Emma watched them go, understanding that some friendships were built on proximity and lifestyle rather than genuine connection. By evening, the condo was empty, except for the furniture that had come with it. Emma walked through the rooms one last time, remembering the parties, the dinners, the mornings waking up thinking this was her life. But it had never been her life. It had been her mother's generosity, which Emma had mistaken for her own success. She locked the door behind her and left the keys with the building manager. Ms. Chen, the manager said, I just want you to know, your mother was always kind to our staff, always remembered our names, asked about our families. She's a good woman. I know, Emma said, feeling the weight of that truth. I'm finally starting to understand just how good. The new apartment, March 31st. The Sunset District apartment was in a 3-story building with no elevator, no doorman, no amenities. The walls were thin. You could hear the neighbors arguing about whose turn it was to take out the trash. Emma and Brandon moved in with the help of a U-Haul truck Brandon's friend let them borrow. They carried boxes up 2 flights of stairs, their backs aching, their hands blistered. This is humbling, Brandon said, setting down a box of books in what would be their bedroom. This is reality, Emma corrected. That night, they slept on an air mattress because their furniture wouldn't be delivered until next week. The mattress had a slow leak, so by morning, they were nearly on the floor. Emma lay there, listening to foghorns from the ocean a few blocks away, and thought about her mother. Where was she? Was she okay? Did she hate Emma for what she'd said? She picked up her phone and typed another message. Mom, I know you don't want to talk to me. I don't blame you. But I need you to know that I'm finally understanding what you tried to teach me. I'm learning what things cost, what they're worth, how hard people work for everything I took for granted. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Send. No response. But Emma hadn't expected one. 3 weeks later. April 20th. Emma was working late at her marketing agency, trying to compensate for the distraction of the past few weeks by being the first one in and the last one out. Her boss had noticed her renewed dedication. Chen, nice work on the Willow and Crane campaign, he'd said that afternoon. I'm putting you up for the senior account manager position. It was a promotion Emma would have barely noticed 3 weeks ago. Now, with the potential salary increase to $78,000, it felt monumental. She was reviewing presentation slides when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Emma, this is Thomas Reeves. Emma's heart started pounding. Mr. Reeves, is my mother okay? She's fine. She asked me to call you. She'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock at the Chen Holdings office. She would? She wants to see me? Yes, come to the 20th floor. Ask for me. Mr. Reeves, can you tell me, is she angry? Does she hate me? Thomas was quiet for a moment. Your mother doesn't hate you, Emma. She never did. She was just waiting for you to be ready. Strong. That's what you've been wanting. I'm terrified, Emma admitted. What if she never forgives me? Then you keep trying, Brandon said, for as long as it takes. The meeting, April 21st, 10 o'clock in the morning. Emma took the morning off work. She dressed carefully in a simple navy dress. Nothing designer, nothing expensive. She took the bus to the financial district, budgeting the 45 minutes the trip would take. When she arrived at Chen Holdings, Christopher, the receptionist, smiled at her. Miss Chen, Mr. Reeves is expecting you. Conference room A. Emma walked down the hallway on unsteady legs. The door to conference room A was closed. She knocked. Come in. She opened the door. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. At the head of the table sat her mother, Margaret Chen, dressed in a charcoal business suit, her hair perfect, her hands folded in front of her on the table. To her right sat Thomas Reeves. To her left, Patricia Dominguez. And in the chairs along the table were 3 other people Emma didn't recognize, all with laptops and professional demeanors. Emma, her mother said, her voice professional but not cold. Please, sit down. Emma sat, feeling like she was in a job interview for a position she'd already failed. I asked you here today because Chen Holdings is launching a new initiative. Margaret began, a community housing development project in Oakland, 120 units of affordable housing for families earning between $40,000 and $70,000 annually. Emma nodded, not understanding why she was here. The project will require on-site management, Margaret continued. Someone to oversee tenant relations, handle maintenance coordination, manage community programs. The salary is $55,000 annually, plus a reduced rent unit on-site. 1 bedroom, 900 square feet. Emma's eyes widened. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity, Margaret corrected, if you're interested. Mom, I don't know anything about property management. You'll learn. We have training programs. Patricia will oversee the legal aspects. Thomas will handle the financial side. But we need someone who understands what it means to live in that income bracket, who knows what it's like to struggle to find affordable housing in the Bay Area. Margaret looked at her daughter directly for the first time since Emma had entered the room. 3 weeks ago, you didn't understand that. Now, I think you're starting to. Emma felt tears forming. Mom, I'm so sorry for what I said, for how I treated you, for everything. I know you are, Margaret said softly. But I don't want your apologies, Emma. I want your growth. I want you to take this opportunity and build something meaningful. Not for me, but for yourself, and for the families who will live in those homes. Why are you doing this? After everything I said to you? Margaret stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city she and David had conquered one property at a time. Because 35 years ago, your father and I needed someone to believe in us, to give us a chance when we had nothing but determination and dreams. This project isn't charity, Emma. It's an opportunity. You'll work harder than you've ever worked. You'll be accountable to this board, to the tenants, to the community. But if you succeed, she turned back to face her daughter. If you succeed, you'll have earned something real, something that's truly yours, not because you're my daughter, but because you proved yourself. Emma stood up, her legs shaking. I want the job. I'll work harder than anyone. I'll prove to you that I understand. That I've learned, Margaret said. Don't prove it to me, Margaret said. Prove it to yourself. Thomas slid a contract across the table. If you're serious, sign here. Start date is May 1st. You'll have 2 weeks of training before the first tenants move in. Emma picked up the pen, and for the first time in her life, she signed something understanding exactly what it meant, what it would cost her, what she would have to sacrifice to succeed. When she finished signing, Margaret spoke again. One more thing. Yes? I said, there's a clause in the employment contract. If you fail to meet performance standards, if you miss benchmarks, if you don't fulfill your obligations, your employment will be terminated. No second chances because you're my daughter. You'll be held to the same standards as any other employee. I understand. Do you? Margaret asked. Because for 35 years I gave you advantages without you understanding their cost. I'm not making that mistake again. Emma looked at her mother, really looked at her for the first time, and saw not the quiet woman who served dinner in the background, but the powerhouse who had built an empire in silence. I understand, Mom, and I'm ready. 6 months later, October 22nd, the Oakland Community Housing Complex was thriving. Emma had personally welcomed 68 families into their new homes. She'd organized community gardens, after-school programs, job training workshops. She worked 12-hour days. She dealt with maintenance emergencies at 2 in the morning. She mediated neighbor disputes and coordinated with city services. Her apartment in the complex was simple. 900 square feet with basic furniture she'd bought from IKEA on a payment plan. But it was hers, truly hers. Brandon had moved back to his parents' house in Sacramento. They'd mutually agreed to end the engagement. It wasn't bitter, just honest. They'd both been living in a fantasy, and reality required different things from each of them. Emma was sitting in her small office in the complex's community center when someone knocked on the door. Come in. Her mother entered, looking around at the space with careful attention. The walls were covered with children's artwork. A bulletin board displayed job postings and community resources. Everything was modest, but everything was meaningful. Hi, Mom, Emma said, standing up. Don't get up. I just wanted to stop by and see how things were going. Good. Really good. We just reached 98% occupancy. Margaret smiled. Thomas showed me the numbers. You're ahead of projections. I've been working hard. I can see that. Margaret sat down in one of the worn chairs across from Emma's desk. You've lost weight. I walk everywhere now. Can't afford a car yet, so I take the bus or I walk. It's actually nice. I see the city differently when I'm not driving through it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Mom, Emma finally said, I need to thank you. For what? For loving me enough to let me fall, for teaching me the hard way, because I wouldn't have learned any other way. For building everything you built and then having the courage to let me discover it through consequences instead of explanations. Margaret's eyes glistened. You're welcome. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you hide it all? Why didn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning? Margaret thought carefully before answering. Because your father and I built Chen Holdings in silence and humility. We never wanted to be the wealthy family that showed off. But at some point, my humility became deception. Deception that allowed you to develop misconceptions about value, about work, about sacrifice. I understand that now, Emma said. Every day, I see families moving into these apartments, and I watch their faces when they get their keys. They're so grateful, so proud. Because they earned this. They applied, they qualified. They're paying rent they can actually afford. And that means something. That's what I wanted you to understand, Margaret said. Not gratitude toward me, but understanding of what things cost, what they mean. Emma came around the desk and hugged her mother for the first time in 6 months. They held each other, two women, who'd both learned difficult lessons about love and boundaries and the difference between giving and enabling. "I love you, Mom," Emma whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart. I always have." 1 year later, March 26th, the anniversary. It was exactly 1 year since the engagement party that changed everything. Emma stood in front of the Oakland Community Housing Complex with a ribbon stretched across the new community center entrance. 120 families were gathered. Children ran around playing. Older residents sat in lawn chairs. The smell of a community barbecue filled the air. Thomas Reeves stood at the microphone. "Today we're celebrating not just a building, but a community. And I'd like to recognize the person who made this community what it is. Emma Chen, our on-site manager, who has worked tirelessly to make this more than just affordable housing, but a place where families thrive." Everyone applauded. Emma felt her cheeks flush. "Emma," Thomas continued, "would you like to say a few words?" Emma approached the microphone, her heart pounding. A year ago, she'd been standing in a Napa vineyard, surrounded by expensive champagne and designer clothes, thinking she understood success. "A year ago," she began, "I thought success was measured in square footage and price tags. I thought independence meant having access to money without thinking about where it came from. I thought strength was never needing help." She looked at her mother, standing in the back of the crowd, deliberately out of the spotlight. "I was wrong about all of it. Success is measured in the lives you impact. Independence is understanding the value of what you have and earning it honestly. And strength is sometimes having the courage to let the people you love learn lessons the hard way." She cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. Children ran into the new community center to see the computer lab, the art room, the library filled with donated books. Later, as the sun set over Oakland, Emma and Margaret sat on a bench outside the complex. "I got my 6-month performance review," Emma said. "Thomas said I exceeded expectations. I read it. And now I wanted to ask you something." "Yes?" "The senior property manager position at Chen Holdings, the one that's opening up next quarter. Can I apply for it?" Margaret turned to look at her daughter. "Do you think you're qualified?" "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "I've managed this complex for a year. I've worked with tenants, coordinated maintenance, handled budgets, built programs. I know I can do the job." "Then apply," Margaret said. "But Emma, understand something. If you apply, you'll be competing against other qualified candidates. I won't give you special treatment. You'll be evaluated on your merit alone." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Emma replied. They sat together as the Oakland lights began to twinkle, as families returned to homes they could actually afford, as children laughed in playgrounds built with intention rather than extravagance. "Mom," Emma said softly, "thank you for teaching me what matters." "You taught yourself," Margaret replied. "I just created the conditions for you to learn." If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. 5 years later, present day. Emma was 33 years old now, standing in the Chen Holdings boardroom as the newly appointed Chief Operating Officer. She'd worked her way up from property manager to senior manager to director of operations, earning every promotion through performance, not family connection. The boardroom was filled with investors, city officials, and community leaders. On the screen behind Emma was a presentation, the Chen Initiative, expanding affordable housing across Northern California. "Our proposal," Emma said confidently, "is to develop 6 new housing complexes over the next 3 years. Total investment, $45 million. Expected social impact, 750 families housed in dignified, affordable conditions." She clicked through slides showing architectural plans, budget projections, community impact studies, everything she'd learned from her mother, from her years of hard work, from her journey from entitlement to understanding. The Chen family believes, she continued, looking at her mother who sat in the back row deliberately, always deliberately, that buildings aren't for accumulating wealth. They're for creating dignity. And that's what this initiative represents. The investors asked questions. Emma answered every one with confidence earned through experience. When the meeting ended, 3 of the 5 investor groups committed funding on the spot. After everyone left, Margaret approached her daughter. "That was impressive," she said. "I learned from the best," Emma replied. "Your father would be so proud of you, of the woman you've become." Emma felt the familiar tightness in her throat that always came when they talked about her father. "I wish he could see this." "He can," Margaret said with certainty. "Every day, through every choice you make, he sees." They walked to the window, looking out at San Francisco Bay, at the city they were slowly transforming, one affordable unit at a time. "Mom," Emma said, "I met someone." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Oh? His name is Michael. He's a high school teacher in Oakland. He makes $52,000 a year. He drives a used Toyota. He lives in a rent-controlled apartment with 2 roommates." "And?" Margaret prompted, smiling slightly. "And he's kind. He's passionate about education. He volunteers on weekends teaching financial literacy to at-risk youth. He has no idea about Chen Holdings or our family's wealth, and I've decided not to tell him. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I want him to know me for who I am, not for what I have access to. I want to build something real with him, the way you and Dad did, starting from scratch with honesty and effort and genuine connection." Margaret put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Then you've learned everything I hope to teach you." "I learned the hard way," Emma said, "but I learned." "The best lessons usually hurt," Margaret replied, "but they last forever." They stood together, mother and daughter, 2 generations of women who'd both learned that true wealth isn't counted in properties or bank accounts, but in character forged through challenge, in relationships built on honesty, and in legacies that extend beyond money into meaning. Emma thought about the girl she'd been 5 years ago, standing in a Napa vineyard telling her mother to pay rent. That girl seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. But that girl's mistakes had created this woman, this person who understood value, who earned respect, who built things that mattered. "Mom," Emma said, "thank you for breaking the silence." "Thank you for hearing what it said," Margaret replied. And in the comfortable quiet that followed, in the space where words weren't necessary, because understanding had been earned through experience, both women knew that sometimes the greatest act of love is not what you give, but what you have the courage to take away until someone understands its true value. Outside, San Francisco continued its eternal rhythm. Families moved into affordable homes. Teachers shaped young minds. Mothers and daughters learned from each other across generations, and somewhere in the heart of it all, the Chen legacy continued, not in square footage or dollar amounts, but in the quiet dignity of buildings that housed dreams, the steady strength of women who built empires in silence, and the hard-earned wisdom that true success is measured not in what you own, but in who you become while earning it. I am Margaret Eleanor Chen. I'm 66 years old now. And this is the story of how my silence nearly destroyed my relationship with my daughter, and how breaking it saved both of us. But more than that, it's the story of how love sometimes has to be hard to be real, how boundaries are the framework of genuine respect, and how the greatest inheritance isn't money or property, but the character to understand what both are truly worth. And in the end, that's the only legacy that matters, the only one that lasts, the only one worth building.